Welcome to Uncovered Biblical History and Traditions, the channel dedicated to lost stories of the biblical past. Discover stories of pre-Christian historical roots, biblical legends, lost church history and forgotten historical characters of faith. It is very helpful if you hit the like, subscribe and share. Help build my channel and let's take a look together into these uncovered forgotten tales. Imagine this. Every year, thousands of French gypsies converge on a remote coastal village in southern France, making an ancient pilgrimage that predates written memory. They come not for gold, not for glory, but to honor three women who stepped off a simple boat nearly 2,000 years ago and changed the spiritual landscape of Europe forever. But here's what will shock you. One of these women was a black servant who became more revered than queens, another was a practical housewife who built a religious empire, and the third was history's most misunderstood woman whose voice could literally melt the hearts of hardened criminals. This is the extraordinary true story reported in the London Morning Post in 1923, a story that connects 1st century Palestine to medieval France, and reveals how three remarkable women from the household of Lazarus became the architects of Christianity's expansion into the heart of the Roman Empire. In May of 1923, a British journalist stood on the shores of Saint Mary's de la Mer, watching something extraordinary unfold. Thousands of French gypsies had traveled from across the continent to this small village at the mouth of the Rhone River, continuing a tradition stretching back through the mists of time. They came to venerate three women, Marie Salome, Marie Jacob, and most remarkably, Sarah, a black servant whose memory burned brighter in their hearts than any royal saint. What the journalist witnessed wasn't just a religious gathering, it was the living echo of one of history's most audacious missionary enterprises. According to ancient traditions maintained by these traveling people, a simple wooden boat had once carried refugees from persecution following Christ's crucifixion to this very shore. When the boat's passengers stepped onto French soil, they brought not just their faith, but a strategic plan that would transform the religious landscape of an entire continent. At the center of this remarkable story stand three women whose names have echoed through history. Marie Salome arrived as a recognized member of Joseph of Arimathea's inner circle, a woman with apostolic authority specifically commissioned to preach the word. The British records knew her as Saint Salome, a title speaking to her recognized spiritual authority in an age when women's voices in religious matters were often silenced. Marie Jacob's story reveals complex identity puzzles that historians still grapple with today. Scholars believe she may have been Mary Cleopas, a Judean refugee whose Roman husband had been converted by Jesus himself. After her husband's death, she likely reverted to her ancestral family name, Jacob, connecting her to the very lineage that produced the Virgin Mary. This wasn't merely a name change, it was a statement of identity linking her directly to the most sacred bloodlines in Jewish tradition. Yet perhaps most fascinating was Sarah, the black servant whose veneration reveals the radical inclusivity of the early Christian movement. While pilgrims honored all three women, it was Sarah who received their most intense devotion. Here was a servant, a woman of African descent, being revered above queens and nobles. Her prominence speaks to something profound about early Christianity's message, that spiritual authority transcended every human hierarchy. What makes this story remarkable isn't just who these women were, but how their missions were orchestrated. This wasn't random refugee movement, it was strategic deployment worthy of a military campaign. Under the direction of Saint Philip and the administrative genius of Joseph of Arimathea, each missionary was assigned to specific locations across Gaul based on careful analysis of political, cultural, and spiritual factors. Martha of Bethany exemplified this strategic thinking. Known for her practical mindset and administrative abilities, she had managed a household that served as Jesus' favorite retreat during his ministry. Her home in Bethany had been the gathering place for disciples, making her intimately familiar with Christian doctrine and community organization. When assigned to Arles, she brought these skills to bear on establishing one of the first major Christian centers in southern France. But Martha's story reveals the flexibility of this missionary enterprise. When Trophimus arrived from Britain to take over leadership at Arles, Martha didn't resist. Instead, she gracefully transitioned to Tarascon, where she spent the remainder of her life building another Christian community alongside her faithful companion, Marcella. Trophimus proved an inspired choice for Arles. Described as energetic, practical, and an intelligent organizer, he transformed Arles into more than just a local church. Under his leadership, it became the first metropolitan center of Narbonne, with influence stretching across vast territories. For centuries, Arles remained one of Christianity's most important strongholds in France, testament to the strategic vision of the original planners. Perhaps no figure better illustrates the depth of commitment required than Marcella, Martha's faithful handmaid. Her story reads like an epic novel. She had served in the Bethany household where Jesus regularly stayed, witnessed Lazarus's resurrection from the dead, and stood at the foot of the cross during the crucifixion. Yet she left all this behind to accompany Martha on a journey from Palestine to Gaul, then to Britain, and finally back to Gaul. Marcella's devotion wasn't just personal loyalty, it was spiritual partnership. When Martha died peacefully at Tarascon, Marcella was there, providing comfort in those final moments. Rather than retreat into grief, she continued the ministry they had built together for several more years, demonstrating leadership capacity that transcended her servant status. Her death, like Martha's, was peaceful, a natural transition that spoke to lives well lived in service to their calling. While each story is remarkable, none captures the imagination quite like Mary Magdalene's. Contemporary accounts describe her as possessing classic beauty and a rich voice that created reverence and pleasure in all who encountered her. But these weren't mere aesthetic gifts, they were tools in service of an extraordinary spiritual calling. Mary Magdalene's ministry at Aix represented evangelism at its most effective. Ancient documents record that her preaching could melt the most hardened soul, and that she converted multitudes to the faith. This wasn't hyperbole. The entire region around Aix became saturated with her memory, filled with memorials and relics that testified to her impact. So profound was her influence that she was revered as a saint before her death, an almost unprecedented recognition in the early church. Working alongside her was Maximin, who became the first bishop of Aix. Their partnership demonstrates the collaborative nature of this missionary enterprise, men and women working together as equals in building the kingdom of God. When both died natural deaths after decades of service, they left behind not just churches but entire communities transformed by their message. The historical reliability of these accounts receives remarkable support from Maurus Rabanus, Archbishop of Mainz from 776 to 856 AD. His manuscript, Life of Mary Magdalene, now treasured in Oxford University's Magdalen College Library, provides crucial validation for these traditions. Rabanus explicitly states that his information came from accounts that our fathers have left us in their writings, indicating access to sources much older than his own work. What makes Rabanus's testimony particularly compelling is his detailed description of the missionary deployment. He lists the leadership structure, confirms the departure by way of the sea, describes their arrival near Marseille, and validates the systematic distribution across Gaul under divine guidance. This wasn't legendary embellishment written centuries later, it was careful historical documentation based on earlier sources. One intriguing aspect involves the numerical puzzle at this story's heart. Rabanus and other sources confirm that 8 members of Joseph's original missionary band returned from Britain to establish churches in Gaul. But if Marie Jacob was indeed Mary Cleopas from the British records, that would make 9 missionaries, a number holding deep symbolic significance in Christian numerology. This possibility gains credibility considering biblical precedent for name changes and social customs of the era. A Judean widow might well revert to her ancestral family name, especially if that family could claim connection to the house of Jacob and relationship to the Virgin Mary. Such genealogical connections weren't mere social climbing, they carried profound theological implications about continuity between Jewish tradition and Christian innovation. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of this story is its endurance. The French gypsy pilgrimage that caught the British journalists' attention in 1923 continues today, nearly 2,000 years after those first refugees supposedly stepped onto French shores. The churches established by these missionaries became the foundation stones of French Christianity, with influence extending far beyond their original territories. The strategic vision demonstrated in this missionary enterprise, careful personnel selection, systematic territorial assignments, collaborative leadership structures, reads like a masterclass in organizational development. These weren't random religious enthusiasts, they were skilled professionals implementing a comprehensive plan for cultural transformation. As we reflect on this extraordinary story, we're struck by how it challenges our assumptions about history, gender, and religious authority. Here were women, including a servant, who wielded spiritual influence that shaped nations' destiny. Their story reveals early Christianity as a movement transcending every human boundary, racial, social, economic, and gender-based. The next time you see news of pilgrims gathering at ancient sites, remember the Bethany sisters and their companions. Remember that behind every enduring tradition lies human courage, strategic vision, and willingness to risk everything for something greater than oneself. These remarkable women didn't just carry their faith across the Mediterranean, they planted it so deeply in European soil that it continues bearing fruit 2 millennia later. If you would like further context and the rest of the story, check out previous videos and future videos. If you would like more information where to research this subject, pause this image and look into these resources or find resources in description. If you have book sources or links of your own on this subject, please share in comments or email me. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this forgotten biblical story. Leave a like, comment, share and subscribe. This is very helpful. Join me next time for another lost story of our biblical history. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe for more great content. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. See you in the next video.